Hello and welcome to Spardha Lines, your one-stop destination for the civil services preparation, UPSC, KPSC and other relevant examinations. Before we start with our today's analysis, I have two good news for you. The first is with respect to our test series. Yesterday, the first part of the test series was on 26/11/2023. Everything went well. We've also had an elaborate discussion as well. Many people did take up the test. They did understand what are the type of questions that can be asked in the CTI, PDO and the KAS exam. The second one will be on 3rd of December from 10 AM to 11:30 AM. So what should you do? Subscribe to this test series and also give these test series so that you understand what could be the questions that could be possibly be asked in all these examinations. That's the good news one. The second good news is we do not have much of articles from the Hindu for today. All that we have is some articles where we will have the brief explanation for all these articles, because many articles that we have already taken have been discussed. We have discussed these articles in an elaborate way. One is to do with the infrastructure that we are developing in the Himalayan region. We've also been discussing about the governors as well. We've also been discussing about couple of bills. All of these have been discussed, but what we have picked up is articles which we have not discussed, and most of these articles will be only brief discussions. So this is another good news. You don't have to listen for the entire half an hour or 45 minutes, but what we will have is a brief explanation of some of the important articles from the UPSC and the KPSC examination point of view. Let's look into the first article. The first article is speaking about the Constitution Day. When we speak about the Constitution of India, the Constitution of India is one of the lengthiest written constitutions of the country. And as we speak about our constitution is one of those constitutions which has been picked up from multiple sources as well. The Constituent Assembly, which was formed to prepare the constitution, has referred multiple constitutions world over and has ultimately come up with the most intellectual and beautiful of the constitution, primarily to make sure that all of us have a constitution which is able to give out terms and dictate terms within the premise of the constitution. When we speak about constitution, there is one word called as the constitutionalism. What is this word called as constitutionalism? When you say constitution, it is nothing but the bare act written in wordings. This means that there is a bare act, there are wordings that are written in the constitution. Someone has to listen to this constitution, someone has to implement this constitution, and there is a prescribed boundary also for the constitution. Does this mean that the government of India can supersede it, or the government of respective states can supersede the constitution? No. It means that there is a boundary that is also defined for the government. There is a boundary that is also defined for the legislature, the executive and even for the judiciary. That defined boundary beyond which a government or the legislature cannot go is what is called as constitutionalism. So the constitution is nothing but the bare act written in the constitution, but when given the life to, what happens? There is a contour, there is a boundary beyond which the constitution cannot be rewritten. The constitution will have to be heard. The constitution will have to be interpreted within the contours of the constitution. So if the government tries to supersede its jurisdiction, that will not be allowed, which is called as the constitutionalism. So why are we discussing about it? That is because every year 26th November is celebrated as the Constitution Day. Why do we celebrate the Constitution Day? Constitution Day is also known as the Samvidhan Divas. This is celebrated on 26th November every year, primarily to commemorate the adoption of the Constitution of India. When did we adopt the Constitution? We adopted the Constitution on November 26th, that is in 1949. The Constituent Assembly of India adopted the Constitution of India, which came into effect from 26 January 1950. So it is the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment on 19th November 2015 notified the decision of Government of India to celebrate 26th day of November every year as Constitution Day to promote constitution values among citizens. When we speak about Constitution of India, there are two ways of reading it. One is what is called as the original intent approach. The other is what is called as the living tree approach. What is this original intent approach? When we speak about the original intent approach, it is how the Constituent Assembly framed these articles. It is about how it was originally envisaged, prepared and notified by the Constituent Assembly. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, we have Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Article 21 of the Indian Constitution basically speaks about right to life with personal liberty. When we speak about the wordings of the Article 21, did it originally have right to privacy? No. Did it originally have right to environment? No. Did it originally have right to health? No. When we speak about Article 21, it also laid down a procedure established by law. This over a period of time was also interpreted as due process of law. So as we say original intent approach or original theory approach of the Constitution, it means what did the Constituent Assembly originally think about a particular article. So if we say right to life, it is about right to life from the procedure established by law. So the legislature will establish a procedure and the executive will be only able to follow that particular procedure, and the judiciary will only interpret what is given by the legislature. It does not look into the spirit behind the law, but this changed over a period of time. The procedure established by law also became the due process of law, and one of the landmark judgment where this procedure established by law also became due process of law is the Maneka Gandhi case in the year 1978. So what exactly happened? They also looked at the spirit behind the law. So the original intent is to view the article, view the section, view a particular premise from the original intent. That is, there will be no changes whatsoever. Whatever the Constituent Assembly thinks of, that will be interpreted by the judiciary. That is original intent, because I am thinking from the lens, the viewpoint of the Constituent Assembly. Then what we have is called as the living tree approach. The living tree approach is also called as the organic approach. So what is this living tree approach? As we change from changing times, we also have to evolve our thought process as well. What was good, what was adaptable to one specific period of time may not be right for the next subsecutive number of days. For example, when we say Article 21, Article 21 originally did not have right to privacy, but at this particular period of time, right to privacy is also important. Why? Because it is an intricate aspect of Article 21. When you see Article 21, we have the Puttaswamy judgment, which also said that right to privacy is an aspect of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Was it originally present in the Indian Constitution? No, it was not. It was interpreted, reinterpreted, and new words were added, new meaning was given to it, and that is the primary reason. Article 21 is changing with changing times, and at the same time we are giving new interpretations to Article 21, and that is what is called as living tree approach. So as and when a tree grows, it also has branches that is coming out, so new interpretation is given to that very article. So the Constitution of India has two ways of looking at it: visualizing it, perspectualizing it, and looking at it primarily because there is original intent approach, and at the same time we also have the living tree approach. That is why when we speak about any specific judgments for that matter, we also go back to what the Constituent Assembly spoke about. So that also gives us a new interpretation to evolve over a period of time. And as we say, when we speak about Article 17, Article 17 is only with respect to untouchability between the castes. There are certain specific castes were treated in a gruous form, and these people were not treated equally, and as a result Article 17 said untouchability. It's not untouchability in the health related parameters, it is untouchability with a historical sense for a specific caste group. But this untouchability has also been reinterpreted by the Supreme Court in number of judgments with respect to untouchability of the women. It is also speaking about treating a specific gender as untouchable. So untouchability, which was originally envisaged for a specific caste group, has now been reinterpreted with respect to certain certain section of the women when they're not being given the rights that they will have to be upholded. And at the same time, if gender identity, these third genders, people's rights are not being given, that is also being reinterpreted as what is called as untouchability. So the Constitution Day basically invokes those thoughts about the adaptation of the Constitution on 26th of November 1949, and it goes on to say that Constitution is a beautiful document which has to be ensuring constitutionalism, and as we change with changing times, what we have to keenly watch is the living tree approach or the organic approach, and that is what is the meaning of the Constitution Day. Now let's look into the next article. And before we look into the next article, I'm sorry, when we speak about the Constitution, as I originally told you, we have the lengthiest written Constitution of our country. Where have we borrowed these features from? We have the Indian Constitution, where we borrowed from multiple constitutions, the British Constitution, American Constitution, Canadian Constitution, Irish Constitution. So when I say directive principles, where did we import this concept from? We imported it from the Irish Constitution. Weimar Constitution has it from the emergency provision. So the emergency provision was from the Weimar Constitution, which is from Germany. And Sovereign Constitution, the 5-year plans which we had, the planning commission when we had, now it has been imposed or reimposed with the Niti Aayog. So the 5-year plans was from the Sovereign Constitution. Fundamental duties were from the Sovereign Constitution, and from the South African Constitution, what we have is the amendment of the Constitution. And we also have the major committees of the Constitution, that is during the Constituent Assembly: Union Powers Committee headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Union Constitution Committee headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Provincial Constitution Committee headed by Sardar Patel, Drafting Committee by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Rules of the Procedure Committee by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, States Committee by Jawaharlal Nehru, and Steering Committee by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. These are very, very, very important from your preliminary examination point of view. So remember all these important factors. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Moulding the Himalayas needs caution. What is this article speaking about? The article here is speaking about the recently happened disaster where in the Himalayan heartland. What was happening? There was a construction of a tunnel. In this tunnel, there were people who were constructing, and as a result, there was an issue, and these people were stuck within the tunnel. They are still there. They are being provided the food. They are being provided all the basic amenities right now, and they are trying to bring out these people as soon as possible. This is one factor. There have been a couple of other factors as well. Flash floods that have been taking place, landslides that have been taking place. Where? In the Himachal Pradesh, where? In Uttarakhand, and we recently saw floods in Sikkim as well, where the glacier flooding did happen. Why is this happening? That is because the Himalayan region happens to be the young region, where you already have the Himalayan mountains, which are also called as the young fold mountains. They are developing, and this is also a region where there will be a lot of tectonic activity. Why tectonic activity? That is because you have the Indian plate. The Indian plate is hitting the Eurasian plate, and as a result, when it hits the Eurasian plate, this region in and around will have earthquakes related issues. So this is a tectonically active region as well. So yes, development is required. Yes, tourism is also required. Yes, development should take place for the people of that particular region. But is it gonna be at the cost of the environment? No. Why? Because when it is a tectonically active region, when there are mountains running across, if you continuously go on to develop, redevelop, and then not give importance to the environment, that is where we will have man-made disaster that strikes. So this canal construction, this tunnel construction, these bridges construction, and at the same time the hydropower activity that is taking place, dams construction, are all leading to the catastrophe of this particular region. And ultimately the author goes on to say that time after time we are not paying heed to the environmental impact assessment. So what is this environmental impact assessment? Whenever there is a project that is coming place, this particular project, whether it is gonna have a ramification, negative impact to that particular section of the society will have to be first understood. Now what if there is a hydropower project, a dam is being constructed, or there is a hydropower project. A hydropower project, yes, it will help us serve the electricity deficiency or the lacuna in that particular place. However, if you are constructing time after time, when you are coming up with new dam projects every now and after, what could this lead to? This could lead to environmental catastrophe, and that particular moment, yes, it will serve the purpose of providing the electricity, but when over a period of time, it can also result in casualty as well. So whenever you are developing a project, ensure what could be the likely consequences of it. So you know, if there is a project, because you already have precedents in the past that if so and so is the character of this particular project, it could likely have negative consequences on the environment as well as on the people. So even before you execute a project, come up with an environment impact assessment, understand what is going to be the impact with this particular project, only then take up the particular project. But we are not doing so. We have the Chardham project. The Chardham project basically connects 4 pilgrimage places. Yes, it is good for the development of the country, it is good for the economic activities of the country, it is good for the people of the country, it is good for the tourism as well as for the pilgrimage. But what are the likely consequences? We are changing the legislature. How? For example, we have the environmental impact assessment. This Chardham project is an entire project. It is from the source to the destination. It is a wholesome project. So this wholesome project will have to be treated as a wholesome project in itself. But what has been done? For this project, they have broken down into a couple of compartments. So this is not taken as one single project, but instead this has been broken down. It has been broken down into a couple of projects so that this environmental impact assessment can be given a free license. So they can be given free leverage so that they can be given all the permissions. Had it been taken as one single project, the environmental impact assessment or the permissions could have been very tough as well. But what do? Instead of treating it as one single project, they've broken it down into a couple of compartments so that they would be able to get these permissions very easily. And because they have now got the permissions easily, we are facing the repercussions of it. These tunnels which are part of the Chardham project should have been treated as one single project, and it would have been very hard and it would have been very tough to get the permissions from the environmental ministry. But that was not done so. It has been broken down into chunks. It has been broken down into different compartments, and when I do so, it is easy for me to get the environmental clearance as well from the environmental ministry. So who is going to face the repercussions of it? Who will see the casualty of it? It is the people of this region. So the Indian Himalayan region where projects have been executed are ultimately falling prey, and we are not keenly following the environmental related problems, but we are only focusing on the development. So this article says one of the major problems in this project is in accepting the fact that Himalayas are the youngest range of mountains and still in the formative stages. Geological and geotechnical studies make the point that this is a dangerous project and fatality induced. Why? The main central thrust of the Himalayas passes a few kilometers north to the incident site. Scientists have pointed out in the past as well. This means that the area is extremely sensitive to earthquakes and frictional shear rocks as present. Constructing in this zone is dangerous. We did discuss the same part, that whenever there is tectonically active region that is emanating, there is the Indian plate which is hitting the Eurasian plate. This is seismically active. So whenever you are planning a developmental program, plan accordingly rather than coming up with only developmental problems that could lead to casualty. Take for example, the Chardham project, which is around 900 kilometers, should have a single environmental impact assessment. However, the project was broken down into 53 sections so that the environmental impact is prepared for a lesser region. The impact exhibited would also be lesser than a larger ecosystem of 900 kilometers. So this could ultimately lead to ramifications for the entire region. Atal Tunnel in Kulu and Laholu and Spiti districts of Himachal Pradesh. There are other examples as well. The executive company was so particular in implementing safety measures that not a single casualty has been reported in its construction. So as a way forward, the author goes on to say that this is an example that we can take. The tunnel, the Atal tunnel that is also being constructed, there is one of the company which is executing that particular project. So whenever a project is being implemented, all the safety measures, the standard operating procedures already implemented will have to come into the picture. So if we are not able to meet these standards, these people should not be allowed to enter into the tunnel. So the standard operating procedures will have to be put in place. A new legislative architecture that allows people to monitor these projects and ensures the geological experts are part of every move is required. So whenever a project is being developed, what are the negative implications of that particular project? Likely consequences of that particular project will have to be understood much prior. Only then execute a project, and we need a legislative backing for the same so that they do not deviate from the established procedures. And whenever we are executing such a project, we have to take into picture the local community's expertise, the civil society groups and community driven organizations as well, because these people have been part of that setup for a very long period of time. They know the whereabouts of this entire region, and finally whenever this particular project has been taken up, these people's viewpoint will also have to be brought into, and ultimately that will also have to be added as part of the project, is what is this article all about. We do not have to go into the nitty-gritties of this because we've already explained in our previous daily current affairs discussion. Now let's look into the next article. This article says fleet electrification to tackle urban pollution. So what is this article speaking about? The article here is speaking about addressing the issues of pollution. So what are the major issues when it comes to pollution? One of the major contributing factor for the pollution happens to be the vehicles. So when it comes to the vehicles, we also have the large fleet vehicles as well. Let's say for example, we also have the trucks. About 1/4 of the oil that is being used in India are being used by the trucks basically for the movement of these goods. For example, we have these trucks which are mostly the diesel run vehicles. What do they do? Basically, whenever we have to transport a particular good from one part of the country to another part, what we make use of is the truck. Yes, we do make use of the railways, we do make use of the portways as well, but majorly what we are making use is in terms of the road connectivity. So when we make use of a particular truck, it moves from destination A, from the source to the destination, from source A to the destination B. What are we making use of? We are making use of the trucks, and these trucks are mostly diesel run trucks, and as a result what we have is excessive pollution in the country. So the author goes on to say that when it comes to the trucks, we have large number of trucks in our country. Most of these are diesel based trucks, and what we have to do is move away from these diesel trucks and ultimately get into the fold of electric trucks. And when we are able to electrize this entire trucks and other transportation tools, then we would be able to reduce the population. In fact, the author also goes on to say that when it comes to the trains, what we also have is the freight corridors as well. What is this freight corridors? When it comes to the railways, we have the passenger trains, we also have the freight trains as well. What is the passenger train? It will carry people from the source to the destination. And when it comes to the freight, let's say for example, I have to move the oil from one place to another, or let's say for example, if I have to move the vehicles from one place to another, what do I make use of? I make use of the railways. So when I make use of the railways, in that case, what do? I ensure that it moves from one place to another via the train, via the railways. And when it comes to the movement of the goods from one place to another via the railways, this entire freight corridors have also been electrified as well. So the author in this case goes on to say that as much as steps have been taken for the electrification of the freight corridors of the railways, we've already taken the steps. The government is also taking the steps for the trucks. That is, as of now we have the diesel trucks. We have to ensure that more number of trucks are electrified. What we have is electrified trucks, which means that what we have is the electric vehicles whose penetration has to increase. So over a period of time, we have the constraints of the infrastructure. For example, how do I charge these trucks? How do I bring about changes in the infrastructure for these electric vehicles? If the penetration of the electric vehicles increases over a period of time, how do I charge the batteries of these trucks if at all they are ever becoming electrified vehicles? So these are the issues that are present. So the author in this particular case goes on to say, with more public infrastructure, more government funding, if we are able to have more charging stations across the entire country, we will have more penetration of these truck vehicles. So basically these trucks will be able to ensure that there is minimization of the impact of the pollution, because most of it are diesel ones. What we need to have is more electric ones, and once we have the electric ones, the pollution impact will be reduced. Added to it, declaring some of the expressways and national highways as green freight corridors will also have a demonstration effect in the country. Accelerating feasibility studies, demand aggregation, supply readiness, prudent risk allocation strategy are required to create green freight corridors. Such corridors can first evolve in small stretches of 500 kilometers of routes with heavy truck movement. What we also require is innovative financial instruments, incentivization of charging infrastructure, facilitation of entrepreneurial efforts, and a conducive regulatory mechanism. So if we are able to provide more finances, give them incentives so that infrastructure is developed, and at the same time more entrepreneurs come up with new innovations, we will be able to tackle the urban pollution primarily by reducing the number of trucks on the roads, and ultimately ensure that we have more electric vehicles in the near future. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, Bill bars courts from inquiring into privileged communication between ministers and president. What is this article speaking about? This article primarily speaks about the privileged communication. What is this privileged communication? Let's say, for example, we have the minister and we also have the president. This is at the central level, and we also have the minister and we also have the governor at the state level. There is a privileged communication that takes place between the minister and the president, or the minister and the governor. Can the coach ask for this privileged communication? What was the communication that you've had with the governor or with the president? No. Even if the court wants such a privileged communication, the ministers need not have to give what is the basis of the recommendation on which the minister gave it to the president, what is the basis on which the minister gave the recommendation to the governor. So if such information is sought out by the coach, the minister or the president or the governor need not have to give this information. Is what is this privileged communication? So we have the president who has given an assent to the bill. We have the governor who has given permission for a legislation. So they would have given the permission primarily because the minister has asked them to give the recommendation or sign or give assent to that particular legislation. So can the court now ask, what is that the minister said to the president? What is that the minister asked the governor? Can you please explain? No, the court cannot intervene there. The court cannot ask such questions to the minister. So basically we have the parliament, we have the president and the governor who cannot be questioned the premise on the basis of which you gave assent to that particular legislature. So this article says that the proposed Bharatiya Sakshya bill that seeks to replace the Indian Evidence Act bars the courts from inquiring into any privileged communication between the ministers and the President of India. Although Article 74 of 2 of the Constitution states this, the Union government seeks to give it legal backing by making it part of the evidence book. Despite its presence present in the the Constitution of India, the government of India is saying that we will also give it a legal sanction by coming up with the law. So the courts will not be able to ask what is this privileged communication between the minister and the governor or the minister and the president. So a legal process has been initiated by the government of India. This is what you have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, Centre directs state governments to closely monitor cases of respiratory illness. What is happening in the present situation? There is respiratory illness, that is influenza-like illness. Where is it occurring? It is occurring in China. So what we have is severe acute respiratory illness, and this severe acute respiratory illness is occurring in the country of China. So when COVID-19 did occur, we were not ready for it. Why? Because we did not have enough infrastructure, we did not have enough hospitals as well. So many people passed away during that particular period. So we've already had one such experience. So if similar such things occur in the near future, we should be able to handle it in a much better way. So the central government government has directed the state governments to monitor these kind of respiratory illness. In case people have breathing deficiency, they are not able to breathe properly, they have respiratory illness, in that particular case they may go to the hospitals. The hospitals would be able to withstand these number of people. But what if there are large number of people who ultimately enter the hospitals? They would not be able to meet the exigencies. In that particular moment, what we require is more doctors, more hospitals, more nurses, so on and so forth. So the center has directed the state governments that be prepared, be ready, that in case an eventuality occurs, we should be able to manage all these affairs, because once we were not able to manage over a period of time, we acquired the means and the mechanisms and the procedures and the infrastructure to take over the COVID-19. But now we do not have enough mechanisms for the same. So if at all such things occur right now, you should be in a much better position to handle it, said the central government to the state government. So they are asking the states to ensure that we are prepared by training the doctors and the nurses and other people. There are more hospital beds. We also have the drugs, that is the medicines and the vaccines for the influenza, medical oxygen, antibiotics, personal protective equipment, testing kits and reagents, functionality of the oxygen plants and the ventilators, and infection control practices are all put in place at the hospitals. In case any assistance is required, the same will also be provided by the central government as well. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. If you are liking these initiatives, please do like these videos, hit the subscribe button, and also share it with your fellow aspirants as well. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.